let's start with truth. That's an easy one, and we kind of we never did cover that one, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then they call this flipping tables. I'm just I'm saving the notes here real quick.
And I think we're on your face like a bad stripper. So in case you wanted it on your screen, just letting you know.
No, I'm just giving it a name here. And yeah, I'll go back again. All right, so this is an idea that we got from Mandy that we both liked. Which
Shout
is
out.
a really short thing here and again. And it was just, the idea was just playing around with names, right?
Mandy's been remarkably helpful, not only in artistic greatness, but also in just giving awesome ideas that neither of us would ever thought of. And this is one of them, I think.
So the idea was we got these great names, right? Mac and Mac, which back in the 90s, macking meant like hitting on a girl, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've been doing Mac and Mac Yak. And Mandy's like, well, why don't you do like Mac and Mac Hack or Mac and Mac Attack? And she even mentioned Mac and Mack Unpack. And the one we thought we'd cover today is truth. What a heavy word, man.
Yeah. Well, that's just kind of like your opinion. I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah, well, you know what? It is you're absolutely right. It is.
I know. Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see it written like this with a big T, right?
Yeah.
Etched to the stone. Oh man, that's so heavy. Who? And it's amazing too. I think it's kind of a heavy word, and yet so often people will say, they'll just like make these arrogant claims about having the truth, about knowing the truth. No, it's the truth, man. I totally know the truth. Really, you just know everything, do you? You know, I just want to know the truth. Just tell me the truth from the get-go. Yeah, well, first, the earth cool. Like, it's such a big word. It's often what we call something, you know.
Truth can be used. Yeah, I like that. Zombie. Truth can be used as this word that people try to, well, for lack of a better phrase, tack all of these things that aren't related to truth into. And you know what I mean? So like, oh man, that's the truth. And they're talking about the Big Mac being a better burger than something else. And it's like, that's the truth. This is the truth. This is the truth. And people will be like, oh, LeBron James is the truth. And now they're like, oh, LeBron James ain't the truth. And so there's the word truth has been more gang raped by other words than I can think of any other word possible today, maybe other than religion.
Well, I call this, and there's all sorts of words like this too, these novelizations, like capitalism or socialism or society, like these big, broad, ridiculous words that you can barely use for anything because every time you use them, they mean something different. Everybody hears it.
It's a meaningless word. It's a word that has lost meaning.
It often is, and that's why I call it a zombie noun. Or I'm going to use the original phrase, a nominalization. And there's a really easy test.
Racism is an easy one for people to look at today and see as something that's been a zombie word. Racism at this point, I don't think anyone could give you a true concept of what it means at this point, because it's no longer about an action. It's now about a word. It's no longer about a word. It's about if you even vote for a person who says a word. So it's been expanded to the point where everybody is, so nobody is, and that's.
I'm on a lot of anarchist sites, and there's a couple that are constantly arguing about socialism versus capitalism.
Yep.
And people say, well, there's such and such a thing as socialism, such a thing as capitalism, and you realize that they're just arguing about these broad, ridiculous categories. That don't really say anything because nobody could ever agree on what they mean.
Yeah.
And if you try and fix the word, you end up in these long, useless arguments about nothing.
Here's what I'll say. One time, I can more than one, but there's a specific argument I want to cite where this person tried to say, "Oh no, he was a left-leaning Republican," and then another person was like, "Well, JFK was more of a conservative Democrat." And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, you know what the fuck that really means? It means that no one really has a truly conservative and a truly Democrat view. They all have a blend of it, which means you need to talk about individual concepts and policy, because that's
the fix.
Yep.
If you go talk about the individual premises, if you talk about premises, then you're talking about particular statements. If you're talking about policies, you're talking about particular rules,
Yep.
right? Well, I don't know about Trump's policies. Well, which one? Well, I don't like the one where he thinks it's okay to grab a chick's pussy. That seems like a bad policy.
Yeah.
Right now we're talking about a definite thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's not everything that Trump is about. That's true, but everything that Trump is about isn't really.
So this is what the structure today is formed to create, I think, where basically they try to throw all of the arguments into one argument that is clearly something that could be inferred as wrong. So basically, both the left and the right do this. AOC will kick Amazon out, and then every Republican in Missouri is relating the Democrats' economic policy to AOC's kicking out of Amazon. And that's and these are the games that get played with this kind of structure over and over again. And that's where the word truth loses all meaning, becomes a zombie word. Because is the truth really the Democrat in Missouri has a fully AOC kick Amazon out social? Absolutely not. You think anyone would ever have a role in Missouri with that kind of mindset? No. And that's
Let's make a name for that. What you just described that happens all the time. People will take one premise or one statement, and they'll try and paint it with this giant, broad category. There's got to be work for that. And it might just
Bukkake? Sorry, no, don't do that one.
What were you saying?
It was an inappropriate one, and it was a joke analogy. So
I want to say pigeonholing.
Yeah.
Where we try and bring along all these extra things that really aren't there. So let's unpack truth. That was the whole point here. We're already almost out of time.
Yeah.
Let me tell you the one I heard that I really like, and you tell me what you think, right? And by the way, if we want to talk about premises or policies or statements, these are things that we can say might be true or false.
Yeah. No, these are things that we should be. Go ahead.
I was going to say that, and we've already covered that. That's how you stay away from these big, broad terms that don't really communicate, is to stick to these kinds of specifics when you want to talk about. And very often, if you talk to someone who's into these really broad categories and not really saying anything, if you help them find what they're trying to say, there actually usually is a particular premise or a particular policy or someone's particular statement that they're really taking issue with.
That's the hardest thing for anyone who has a true, genuine interest in the philosophy group, in my opinion, and trying to understand someone on the other side. And it becomes whitewashed over time or just knee-jerk. But if you want to have an understanding, you have to basically do this 20-question process to get them to their own thought on the policy or the premise.
It's all that vague language.
Yeah.
So describe Thomas Sowell's definition of the truth, and tell me what you think. Because I think he says it pretty well. And it's one of these words you don't really see defined much. That's the thing. Like, that's how you can tell you're working with these nominalizations. Because when it comes down to defining it, no one can really define it because it's not a kind of word that's supposed to be definite. Like, that's the thing. When you talk about the truth, it's like this abstract idea, and I use Thomas Sowell's definition. It's an abstract idea that we use to aid our communication. The concept of the truth is something that we can use as like this third-party arbiter, but to actually know the truth, that's kind of beyond us. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's proper with science too. We never are actually ever correct, and this is a philosophical statement I've made for about a decade now. We're never actually correct. We're only less incorrect. And so over time, we're never right. We're only less wrong. We're never correct. We're only less incorrect. And there are things that we can discern to be a truth or a non-truth, but we will never know what the absolute prime truth.
Well, hold on. That's the distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Truth is a broad category. Whether there's something that's true or not, that's something we talk about with a particular thing. Like, those aren't really the same idea at all.
Yeah.
One is the adjective that might or might not apply. The other is this broad category to talk about the universe in general.
Yeah.
And it's when you try and cross those over that people start to
well, and to tie it, not intentionally, but kind of it goes to our previous conversation on the same call here. You know, in a sense, when something, if you were to be gauging it as true or untrue, you'd be looking at the actions. So someone makes statements that they're going to do these amazing things with a socialist policy. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. But you don't say it's the truth. You just say that's great. And then you observe what happens. And then you're like, oh, that ended up to be not true. That ended up to be, not the case. And that's, you have to gauge it versus what the truth is. And that is its behavior when implemented within the environment or the universe that has an objectivity to it. So.
Well, but again, and I'm just being pedantic now. But when you say, "Well, what's the truth?" You mean what's the answer about that statement, or is that idea?
Sorry, yeah. What ended up being the outcome of that experiment? That doesn't mean that it is that there's an absolute truth discerned, but the outcome of that basic social experiment. I mean, everything we've had is anyway. That's another topic, but.
Well, that was the main distinction that we're talking about when it's a communication issue. Those giant abstractions, the truth. What's the truth about capitalism? The truth about capitalism, it's a useless word.
Yeah.
It's been used for the last 200 years. Nobody can use it for anything anymore.
Yeah. Free markets is another great one. The just phrase free markets from, I used to use it all the time around the fucking Republican campaign. Free market, free market, free market. Well, we don't have a free market. What do you actually mean? What are you trying to convey? Are you saying that I'm saying that we should remove all taxes, but what are you actually saying? And that's what free markets, capitalism.
Do you remember 1989 when Gorbachev knocked down the wall?
Yeah, I was 4.
It was like a few months later, a few months before that he discovered that the black market was like 80% of their economy. And so he decreed that anybody could sell anything, anywhere, anytime to anyone.
That's awesome.
It's pretty hard to beat that. But again, that's a particular policy, right? That was one step.
Yep.
We have a free market. Yeah, how do you know? Well, because I don't know, because you can fly the flag. No, that's not really it, is it?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I've made a whole list of these words that just sort of they end up being fluffy and ugly. There's a particular one. I'll go ahead and make it capital. You ever heard of a weasel word?
A what?
A weasel word.
No.
Truth often acts like a weasel word. A weasel can suck the interior of an egg out without leaving a hole.
Wow.
Likewise, when you put the word social in front of something, it takes the meaning away.
Yeah.
And this is a particular kind of word. We should save that for another unpacking. But that guy
social capital
can turn other words into words like social. What's the social truth?
Yeah.
What?
Social justice.
That's another great one, as opposed to like individual justice, I guess.
Well,
But
see,
yeah,
anyone who is being and this is, I don't want to piss people off here, and we shouldn't probably end on this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you just remove yourself from how you want to feel about the word social justice and look at what the concept of social justice actually would mean, it's a wolf mentality. It is just the words together means exactly what all the worst things we've ever done in history has ever done. We take this concept of Jews should be in concentration camps, social justice, because they have been, why? Because they've been within, they're robbing.
Social justice is Thomas Sowell calls that cosmic justice. But again, the issue is it could mean anything. When you talk about social justice here, that's such a vague term. That could mean anything.
And like you said, it can make words worse words. I think that's a time you can see where it has, because when people agree with the philosophy that you can get some kind of massive social justice, you start penalizing people who weren't part of the social problem, for lack of a better bad word. But you start penalizing people who weren't, they had nothing to do with what the justice is you're seeking. And that's the problem with social justice over an individual-based justice, where you're actually penalizing people who had a direct impact on individual issue. And that's where I think social justice has been, completely fucked over people over time. So,
well, the problem with social justice is that it sort of implies that there's a category of private justice, like individual justice. But justice always means something social because it involves other people, right? It has to. That's why it's such a weasel word.
Yeah.
Because
there's nothing to it. By the end of it, there's nothing to it because you can do this all day.
It sucks the meaning out of words. That's what a weasel word is.
Yeah.
It sucks away the meaning. So yeah, as we do, if we do more unpacks, we'll cover more of those weasel words. Social itself would be a good unpacking just for that reason.
In fact, let's stay with the unpack and let's do 2 more words, and then we'll go to a different one of Mary's amazing. We're going to call them we'll think of a fun name for it, but Mary's amazing suggestions, basically, that we've had. Let's do 2 more unpacks after this: truth, social, one other. Then we'll go to maybe attack or something. I'm excited for attack. At one point, one of the people on here who's a troll, we got to do a live troll hunt. So, anyway.
I tried to get Laz involved. He never did. And I'll put down the other possibilities here.
That's probably why you're suspended. I'm just kidding.
Attack. We can do hack, like a life hack or a troll hack.
Yeah.
We got the unpack. We got the yak. What are some other ones? Oh, you know what? This might be appropriate maybe for next summer. If we actually visit each other, we can go to a park or something.
Slack, yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'll think about more words too.
Maq Mack facts? No.
There you go. That could work.
Yeah. Or fast facts with Mac and Mac. Sorry, no, I'm a nerd. So
Slack. We can talk about reporting, but when you claim to have facts.
Yeah, well, no, that would be. We probably wouldn't be talking on many current events because you can't have too many true facts about those. We would be talking about facts on things that probably have misconceptions to them.
Maybe current events work if you wait a while.
Yeah, that's
more information to come out.
Yeah. But do you understand what you just said there? Current events work if you wait a while. I agree completely with that, but that's why they're no longer current.
So let me just sum up here. We avoid the trouble with big, vague abstractions like truth by sticking to cases, not theories. In other words, if we get down to the concretes, not the abstractions, we can avoid those communication traps the nominalizations stand out because somebody says them and everybody nods and says, yeah, for sure. And you can just tell everybody's got a different idea. They think they're agreeing and they have no clue what anybody's saying. And it's a nightmare.
It's a simultaneous game of kindergarten telephone. But no.
Yeah. But in terms of how it plays out, absolutely. Nominalizations cause that problem where people think they're agreeing on something, but they're just being so vague, they don't know what the other guy is really thinking.
Yep. Cases, not theories, would be a good way to position the Paul discussion moving forward. I really like that, and I think that would better articulate the Paul discussion. Bless you.
Thank you. Let me make it clear then, so it lasts. All right, so I think we killed that subject, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
Cases, not theories. And I learned that from I'm going to leave that as is. It's kind of a mess. I learned that from Robert Heinlein, a book, Farmer in the Sky. You know the tribbles from Star Trek?
Yeah, I do.
They were invented as flat cats by Robert Heinlein. Farmers in the Sky was when the farmer family was going to move to Mars. And they got in trouble upon their landing because the 2 boys had spent the whole trip fixing bicycles. They had the wise idea to buy a bunch of crap bicycles and fix them all up on the way there because people on Mars can use bicycles because it was still a colony, right? They didn't have shit. Nobody had fuel, nobody had cars, but having a bike, you can get around, right?
Yeah.
And they showed up and they immediately got in trouble because they walked on some guy's business license and they ended up in court.
Wow.
And the judge said, "Now look, I'm tired of hearing a bunch of theories. Who's got some facts?" And Perfect. Perfect.
Nice.
All right, but let me. I'll save this and I'll throw the notes down, even though these ones are not that great. I do like the big list of novelizations.
Yeah. We'll keep that going, I think. I like the Maq Mack Unpack. Well, Maq Mack Unpack nominalizations. That's the next 3 weeks, baby.